Okay, we are now live.
What happened to Alder? I can't see him anymore.
Can you click on attendees for me?
He's on the list. He's on the list.
He's on the list, I just can't see him.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another way to look at the screen? Okay, now I can see him. I just couldn't see him before. Okay. 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 I need to click over there. All right, it looks like Alder Jones is unmuted. Okay. So we are back in open session. And now that we're in open session, we want to take action on those two items we discussed in closed session. So for item 448-20, we discussed motion to receive and file. Is anybody willing to make that motion?
Unmute.
Okay. I think Alder West moved to receive and file.
Yep, motion
Okay.
to receive and file.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Second by Alder Young. Okay, do we do a roll call for that? You can do all of them.
What?
Okay, all in favor of receiving and file item 448-20, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item, the motion, so item 447-20, we discussed the staff recommendation to disallow. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Motion to disallow.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of disallowing item 447-20?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you. And so next item is item 450-20, communication sponsored by Mayor Mason on behalf of the Human Resource Director to enter into a contract. Oops, sorry, I'm going to put this with the Wright Academy LLC for bias training within the Racine Police Department. Fiscal note, contract is not to exceed $56,000. The funds are available in the 2020 Racine Police Department budget.
Is call-in user 5 the chief by chance?
We have a live unmuted. John Pate, Marcus, Molly, Trevor.
I'm trying to talk to call-in user 5.
Call-in user 5? Is there, who's calling in?
This is Kate.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Kate.
Hi.
Thank you.
So I think Kate was going to speak on this item.
Okay.
Great.
Fabulous. Okay, so you are recognized for this item.
All right, thank you. So we have been working on engaging a company to complete implicit bias training for our police department. So we spoke to a couple of different firms, and we came upon the Wright Academy. Wright stands for Racial Intelligence Training and Engagement. They were selected or identified as the top firm due to their involvement and experience working exclusively with law enforcement. So it's our recommendation that we move forward with this training. If this is approved, we look forward to scheduling training with them in September.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members or comments on this item? Okay, Chair recognizes Alder Tate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, do we have anyone from the organization here to speak on behalf of Wrights and their experience?
We do not.
We do not, but the chief is trying to get on to speak to their experience.
Put this one attendee.
That's Kate.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for him to get on.
I was going to say, give him a call.
All right, we are waiting for Chief to speak to that. Thank you for your patience.
He said that he was attempting to get on, so hopefully we will.
Do we still have event restricted?
No.
Okay.
Let's see if there's other questions. Okay.
Are there any other questions while we're waiting to hear from Chief Howell?
I have some basic comments, but
Okay.
it particularly relates to the efficacy of, implicit bias training, and whether, if we're going to spend money, I'd like for it to be on something that has clear efficacy, in addressing the need that we want to be addressed, and, without either the facilitator on, to kind of speak to what their data says in terms of, what the intention of the training is, what the outcomes of the training is, and how effective it is. I had significant questions in terms of whether we allot these funds for this, because I don't want to just throw money after kind of doing something that everybody else is doing and it not do what we need it to do. And I think part of that is talking about, like, why are we doing this? Like, what do we see in our current police force that we think this training is necessary? And then what do we expect to be different afterwards? Now, obviously, I'm familiar with what implicit bias training is. It's about identifying your own biases and how that plays out in your day-to-day work. But from what I've read in most other articles, or academic or otherwise, it lasts maybe for a week, maybe a month, but usually at best a day or two. And then the 300 hours plus training that they get, from the academy and otherwise, eventually overtakes and gets reinforced and overrules whatever that implicit bias training may have done in that short period of time. So I am concerned about, if we're trying to address something, does the thing exist that's going to address it? And if not, perhaps we need to take a step back, and figure out what that is and how we actually address that need, as opposed to kind of jumping on the implicit bias train that may not be as effective as we actually want it to be, particularly in this time, in this climate. Thanks. So I'll wait for the chief to join, though, to kind of
All
speak
right.
to this.
I believe the chief is with us now. Do you have would you like to repose your question, Alder Tate, regarding? Yes, fire away for the chief. He's on.
Yeah. Well, I don't recall what the original question was at this point. Oh, I was asking about if the facilitator was on to kind of speak to, what their experience is, particularly with this training, the goals, and then the efficacy.
Okay.
And so, Chief, can you speak to the efficacy of the Wright firm and why you have confidence in them compared to others that might likely to do this work, and why this kind of training might be helpful at this time?
Sure. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I did some research, obviously following the MWH culture review. I had an opportunity to do quite a bit of research online relative to the different opportunities that were available for implicit bias training. Certainly there are no limit of firms that we could contract with. The Wright solution actually is a completely different model, and it's been proven. Some of the research that I did, it proved that a great deal of the implicit bias training that was available for law enforcement was absolutely ineffective. It's a different model that we were attempting to bring here. So when I did the research on the Wright training, it's basically, first of all, I mean, it's racial intelligence training. So there's a great deal of cultural training components that are involved in it, and it's highly non-confrontational from the perspective of the founders have a law enforcement background. It's one of the first things I look for to bring people on board who not only would have the opportunity to bring this discipline to the forefront, but who had some experience in law enforcement. And so that's one of the first criteria I looked at it. But then the model of the training is completely different than anything that I had a chance to look at. And so then what I did is I did a little more research relative to where this training had been implemented and what the law enforcement leaders felt about it and how the officers received it. And that's the other thing. I mean, I wasn't really interested in checking a box because the MWH study said that we should do this implicit bias training. That would have been absolutely useless. And there is evidence that indicates that if you bring the wrong training to bear, then ultimately it can have an adverse impact. And but the feedback that I received for the right training was positive from every department that we talked to. And so we just felt like this was the model to go with.
Can you speak a little bit to actually what the model is?
Sure. So and I'm not exactly sure how much information you were provided. But so it starts with the basic EI. So you're going to be dealing with emotional intelligence and how an officer's emotions affect their decisions. And then it gets into SI, some social intelligence. And they're looking at how your emotions affect other people. And then they look at this workplace and community component. And so clearly, you're looking at the culture of your own environment versus the culture of the community that you police. So those three components are the areas of focus, just at a 30,000 foot view. And so when I looked at all the other training that was available, none of those things incorporated emotional intelligence. None of them incorporated social intelligence. That was the first time I'd ever seen implicit bias training get so deep into those elements, which is what intrigued me and attracted me to this particular firm.
So
Okay. Please.
I was just gonna say a little further. So I looked a little bit into Wright, and as far as so what are expected outcomes of our officers going through this? Like what, if you could speak as candidly and perhaps as specifically as you can, what currently exists in the department and what are we trying to remedy by having the department go through this particular training?
Okay, so I'll speak to some bullet points that you'll find in some of the literature, and then I'll speak frankly and candidly in terms of what my expectations are. I mean,
Right.
Clearly we want to make sure that our standard operating procedures are clear relative to cultural guidelines, what we expect. We want to create a bias-free culture, right? That's what you want in policing. And we want to promote de-escalation and greater communication. These are some of the core things that you will find in the bullet points. What I expect out of this training is for people who don't understand the concept of implicit bias. I want them to understand it at a completely different level. The people who struggle with, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but we had in the United States, there were over 200 officers that took their own lives last year. That's significantly more than the number of officers that were killed in the line of duty. And so what we do not realize is that outside of the occasional event where there's a traumatic experience, officers are traumatized over time. And if you've got 10 to 20 years in this career, it's the accumulation of going to a infant death call for service, fatal accident, or any other traumatic event. And so what we want to do is we want our officers to get in touch with the trauma side of what they do. And we want our officers to understand that the traumatic events that they experience ultimately manifest themselves on calls for service that they're on. That's a baseline component that I expect for the officers to learn about and to grow from. Then once you figure out that, okay, I'm traumatized and I need assistance in order to help me get through the day without transferring my pain to someone else, now I have to learn about this cultural competence, right? I have to understand that my perspective of the world is not everybody else's vantage point. The benefits that I've maybe achieved or been entitled to, or however you want to frame it, that's not everybody's worldview. And I have to be able to translate that into effective crisis management. And so I expect for our officers to view, the community in a different light once they're done with this training.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
All right, I'll recognize Alder Meekman next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for that explanation. That does help me a little bit. I think Alderman Tate was saying this, and you had kind of alluded to it as well, is that, a single training isn't going to suddenly change people's perspectives or undo people's biases. Are there follow-up trainings attached to this? Do you have plans for follow-up trainings?
So there's a two-part
rhetoric or the
two-part question. Certainly, we don't expect for one experience to completely reprogram everyone, but we do expect for this to be the beginning of a culture restructuring. And so what we've learned through this organization is that we have an opportunity to have our trainers be trained in this discipline. And so we won't be required to bring this company back. We have the ability to the trainer component will basically give us an opportunity to continue to replenish the workforce as new officers are hired and to refresh the training over time through the trainer component. It's similar to our in-service training. Whenever we refer to any kind of important training, it requires muscle memory. And so this is information that will be repeated over time.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And I don't know if this would be a question the mayor would be able to answer or kind of where we're at with this. And I certainly appreciate, Chief, your efforts in this and the efforts to try and take charge and lead this this path towards change. But we also have created this task force that is working on the police reform topic. Is this something that has been brought before the task force? Has the task force had any input or vetted this in any way? Because I feel like if not, then we have two separate groups working on things not in unison. And that would concern me a little bit, I suppose, as we try and pursue this change effort.
I think, well, I'll just give you a generic answer, and then I think it's appropriate for the mayor to weigh in on his task force. I think the scope of the task force had to do with reviewing police policy. And so I'll let the mayor speak a little more to what the expectations are of that group. And then if there's any blanks to fill in, I'll certainly try to do that.
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Chairwoman Taft. So just as a sort of reminder of where we were when the task force was created, there was also initial actions that I suggest that we take immediately. And one of, some of them were to put our use of force policies online so people can see them. You can now see that at the Racine policereform.org website, where you can see past efforts from the police department, ongoing efforts, and future efforts we hope to take on. Some of it was to create the task force. Now remember, the task force is limited to a 90-day window to review our use of force task policy and look at what sort of citizen oversight mechanisms might be available to us. It's really those two things. But then in addition, one of the things that I said that we needed to do immediately in the wake of the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, in addition to our own sort of evaluation, and so as to not have to wait 6 months for a committee to decide, one of the recommendations coming out there, and frankly, one of the recommendations we got from the MWH study more than a year ago now, was that implicit bias training needed to be embedded into the culture of our police department as a way to improve race relations here in the city and to help build on the enduring trust and confidence that we want our community to have in the police department. So this was an announcement that was made concurrent with the creation of the task force as immediate actions that could be taken course, immediate always becomes relative in government. And so here we are today, having done good due diligence on the part of HR Director Courteau and Chief Howell to vet this firm and others. And what we're finding is that this firm rose to the top and could do the training in a reasonable period of time, i.e. shortly after Labor Day. So that's the context that we found this in. I wouldn't suggest referring this to the task force. The task force has a finite charge in a finite amount of time. I would suggest this is something that has enough merit to move forward on its own.
Did you have any other comments, Alder Minkma?
No, thank you.
Okay. Alder Tate, did you have additional comments or questions?
Yes, but come back to me.
Okay. You are the only one in the queue right now, but I do have a question about, so this is the sticky question about assessment. So what's the assessment embedded in this kind of training? I think you described well, Chief, how the model works and what your expectations are. How do you assess whether those expectations are met or how far along you are?
So at this point, I don't have metrics that I can tell you, how each officer received the training. The metrics will be, when we deploy officers who have gone through this training, do we experience fewer complaints against officers for civility issues? Do we experience less disciplinary issues for officers who are engaged in conduct that's not consistent with our policies? These are the best ways to assess if, in fact, we've moved the needle relative to, improving our culture.
Okay, that seems reasonable. Thank you for that. Okay, Alder Minkma next.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Obviously, prevention is kind of my thing, so I'm always also trying to consider that. Is there a version of this that is going to be a requirement to new recruits, or as a part of the recruitment process that they go through a training like this? So we are ensuring that before we're even putting new officers out in the streets, they've already begun this kind of training and we're embedding this into their psyche very early on.
So great question. This training is not required by the State Training and Standards Board. Subject to my review, I may actually propose that it become a part of state standard training. It will be, as I shared earlier, through virtue of the train the trainer, people who come through our organization will have the opportunity to be exposed to this training. But similar to crisis intervention training and things of that nature, ultimately, if this is a proven model, then this is something that should be advanced to the state level so that it could be incorporated into training the standards policy.
Thank you.
Okay, Alder Tate, did you have the last one up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, who all will be required to participate in this training in the police department?
Everyone.
Okay, great, everybody. And then I heard you say earlier that it will be introduced or implemented into the ongoing training. I see as a part of RIGHT that they kind of have a trainer's training available as well. Do you have in mind which officers in our department who would ultimately become the trainers that continue to kind of keep this as an ongoing item throughout the department?
Yes, I recently tasked Lieutenant Jesse Matoyer to run the training unit, and then we have Sergeant Kevin Sell that's involved as well. And these will be the two people that will be responsible for the majority of the training. We will likely identify other officers along the way, subject to the outcome of this initial training session. But Lieutenant Matoyer, in her role as a commander of training, and Sergeant Sell will be the primary instructors.
Okay. And then the last thing I want to ask, you talked about the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence. I'm curious, are there any anti-racist components to this particular training in terms of viewing things not only from a non-racist view, but ultimately anti-racist.
So they don't label it as anti-racist. There's some cultural competence that's embedded in the course, and so I would encourage you to look at the literature. But I believe the essence of what you're asking me is incorporated into the training. They just don't refer to it as anti-racist. It's more about cultural competence.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, we are in a place to have a motion. Do I have a motion on this item?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chief, for your insights.
Thank you.
So great. The next item then is item 454-20, communication sponsored by Mayor Mason to enter into a research agreement by and between the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the City of Racine. Staff recommendation is to authorize the city clerk and mayor to enter into this agreement. Fiscal note, the $250,000 as budgeted in account number 70113-57355, Smart Cities account, is there, and I believe here with us to speak to this motion is Mr. Martin. Let me move this down to you so you can be heard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Alders. So this item is really a continuation of the Smart Cities initiatives that we began last year. As you know, we became the smallest and first city in Wisconsin to ever reach the Smart Cities designation. We competed with over 130 municipalities in Canada, United States, and Mexico. Off of that, then we had the opportunity to invite hundreds of national, state, and local partners to participate in our series of Racine Smart Cities initiatives and events. And growing out of that, we talked about things from 5G and connectivity to Internet of Things to issues of smart mobility. So this builds off of the partnerships that we began last year. In this case, we will have, for the first time ever, a presence and office for UW-Madison College of Engineering, something that the mayor has been able to negotiate. In addition to that, what we will be focusing our funds on is an electric vehicle that will be part of an automated vehicle experimentation. So we're focused 100% on the capital, but all the intellectual work that will be done from the College of Engineering as well as Gateway Technical College and its faculty and staff is all being provided through the other partners. In addition to that, we will be able to leverage not only the 2-to-1 match in this, but as a result of this partnership, UW-Madison is already actively working with us to bring yet additional resources to support this innovation. So we've been nicknamed Invention City because of the number of patents that helped to grow this city. This is now a proactive effort to continue moving toward innovation and being able to build on smart mobility as a part of that portfolio.
Okay. Do I have any questions on this item for Mr. Martin? Alder Young?
Yes, Mr. Martin, thank you for the presentation. I see that there are opportunities for training of Gateway Technical College students in AV technology. How involved is Gateway, and how engaged are they in terms of funding portions of this project?
Good question. Thank you, Alder. So we've been meeting periodically. Unfortunately, we would have come forward with this even sooner, but for the pandemic. We were very aggressively working on this earlier. But Gateway Technical College has been a very early supporter. The mayor and President Albrecht were among those who were able to actually go to Madison to see the College of Engineering's work on automated vehicles. So about $250,000 worth of support for this initiative will come directly from Gateway Technical College. Another $250,000 will come from the College of Engineering, with the understanding that faculty at Gateway Technical College will be a part of this. They will also be helping teach students the practical and the technical aspects of how to actually retrofit a vehicle, to maintain that vehicle. And again, this is trying to get prepared for new jobs that will come as a result of both the transition toward EV, electric vehicles, as well as the accelerated automation.
Great, thank you. And one question relates to kind of just an overarching 30,000-foot view of this type of work. You know, obviously transportation is critical to the future of Racine, and being on the cutting edge of transportation technology is going to be important for Racine to grow. Could you just speak to how this is going to advance the city of Racine specifically in terms of being more competitive in terms of transit, and how it will impact just the quality of life for our residents?
Great question. So if you recall, one of the issues for mass transit now is it's really designed to carry as many people as possible on what is essentially a tank of a civilian vehicle. I mean, buses are really made to endure, but they're really financially only viable if we fill it. Obviously, in a pandemic, the last thing you want to do is put every essential worker into a 40-passenger bus. What eventually this does for us is, one, it gets us ready for the next leapfrogging forward on the innovation around public transit. Two, it allows us to be much more nimble because at a smaller passenger vehicle, it's less cost to operate it. We can actually run it for a frequent flyer or specific targeted lines. We know the difference between the mismatch where the jobs are currently for family supporting, including in manufacturing, and where our people are, where this labor market's most abundant resource is. So this allows us to begin to look at how we reconnect folks to opportunity, and to be able to do it in a much more efficient way than to have a 40-passenger bus be the only option we have for folks who do not have their own personal transportation. And then lastly, we have had training programs forever for automotive repair. This is moving us into a very different field, and I will remind the council that it voted and the mayor initiated beginning to use our VW settlement money to begin buying electric buses. We've also looked at other aspects of the fleet where we could begin to transition to electric vehicles. This is going to make a fundamental difference in terms of the way we prepare mechanics and other service technicians for these kinds of opportunities. And having Gateway Technical be a first part of that at the foundational steps here allows students in our own field to become among the first trained for these opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Are there any other questions, comments, or anything else? Okay, seeing none, I am going to look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of this motion, item 452-20, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. All right. Next item then we will talk about is communication sponsored by the chair, or item 453-20. Communication sponsored by the chair, providing for an advisory referendum on the November 3rd, 2020 election ballot to measure public opinion on whether the Wisconsin legislature should create a nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional district plans and maps. Staff recommendation is to approve providing for an advisory referendum on the November 3rd, 2020 election to measure public opinion on whether the Wisconsin legislature should create a nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional district plans and maps. Fiscal note is not applicable at this time. You all have received this communication and had the opportunity to co-sponsor. And I guess it's my my motion. So I would just reiterate that this would be a non-binding referendum, sort of to gauge public opinion on whether or not the state should create this nonpartisan method for legislative and congressional districts, and other municipalities and counties have explored this in the state, and this is something that's becoming increasingly more common. And so I will recognize a question from Alder Tate.
Madam Chair, I guess one of my questions is, in terms of the particular question of the referendum, our current governor has established a nonpartisan, or at least establishing a nonpartisan procedure. So I'm wondering if it would be appropriate in that question to not only ask, should the legislature create, but should the legislature create or adopt a nonpartisan, because, the governor currently is creating that nonpartisan process. So should the legislature just adopt that process as opposed to creating their own separate one, knowing the kind of dynamics that exist within state government right now? I think the legislature is quite inclined to create something different when the governor is doing it. So I think we want to have that sort of language in there to say, or could they just adopt, an existing process that is also being proposed by someone else in the state government, as opposed to constantly creating things from scratch, which seems to be a bit of old hat at this point in the legislature. So I'll let others kind of comment on how they feel about this particular item in general before I propose any amendments to the phrasing in the resolution. Excuse me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions about this particular item other than coming from Alder Tate? Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted to compliment the chair for bringing this forward. It's a really important issue, and I think it would be helpful for City of Racine residents to weigh in on this important policy question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Miedema, Alder Miedema.
If there will ultimately be any, or what the plan would be to provide educational background on the importance of this or the relevance of this to what we're trying to accomplish with this? Is that, I don't know if that's something we can put onto the city's website or how we might be able to incorporate that. Just curious.
Right. So I think I don't know specifically what the city is able to do regarding education for this referendum. I know there are a number of community-based groups that are enthusiastic about this and attempting to get more information out. That is something I could certainly talk to the clerk about. I do not have that information for you at this time, however, but I'm happy to follow up before the next council meeting on that item.
Thank you.
All right, Alder Tate.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you were saying you were going to wrap up, I had a Alder Young hand just went up. So Alder Young.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you, leadership, Chairman, on bringing this to this committee and then onto the council. And I would be happy to be listed as a sponsor as this moves from this committee to the entire whole.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Alder Tate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question, perhaps most appropriate for the city attorney. Is there anything that would prohibit, the council from, and as a part of the referendum question, providing a brief synopsis of what the current situation is? I mean, something to the effect of currently the Wisconsin State Legislature, whichever party is in the majority, has the authority to create the maps that determine the legislative boundaries for the Congress and the state legislature. And then having that question follow, is there anything that prohibits that, kind of having that quick blurb or just statement of fact of the current situation and then the question?
Short answer is no, there's nothing that prohibits that. The procedure requires the city attorney to write an explanation of what the referendum means, what it would do, and that I think fairly and certainly would be part of that explanation. And that explanation is also published.
All right, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I would move to amend the current resolution as it reads in the question to read, should the Wisconsin legislature create/adopt a nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional districts, boundaries, and plans and maps?
Second.
Okay, so are you making that a motion, sir?
Yes, move to amend.
We need, okay, do I need a second on that
Second.
motion? Okay. All right.
Someone has to move to adopt the whole thing before you.
I'm sorry. First, we need a motion to adopt the whole thing before we move to amend it. So is there a move to adopt this currently?
So
Move to
moved.
adopt.
Okay, fabulous. And now we can move to amend. So you, would you like to move to amend, sir?
Yep, move to amend the language just referenced.
Okay. So then it should read, communication sponsored by Alder Taft providing for an advisory referendum on the November 3rd, 2020 election ballot to measure public opinion on whether the Wisconsin legislature should create/adopt a nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional district plans and maps.
Yep.
Okay. And I believe Alder Reemsma seconded that. So can we, so if we want to vote on the amended resolution, we can do that now. Right.
The amendment first.
Oh, discussion on the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Please vote on the amendment. Okay. So first we're going to vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, great. So now we can move on the, now we can vote on the amended motion. Yep. So all in favor of the motion as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I was waiting for the unmute to happen. All opposed? Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion passes. Thank you, folks. The next item is a communication sponsored by Alder Young and a request by Matthew Sadowski, Interim Executive Director of the Community Development Authority, seeking authorization to prepare and submit an application for an Economic Development Administration CARES Act application for construction assistance grant for up to $1 million for public infrastructure connectivity improvements for the CDA-owned property at 233 Lake Avenue. Staff recommendation is that funds and assistance available from the EDA CARES Act be requested and the rules of the program be complied with. Further, that the Interim Executive Director and/or Chairman of the Community Development Authority or their designee be authorized to act on behalf of the CDA to submit an application for the CARES Act to assist with the construction of public infrastructure connectivity improvements for 233 Lake Avenue. Fiscal note, the amount of the grant being requested is $1 million. If the grant is received, a soft match of existing funds already committed to the development of the site is expected. No new dollar match is anticipated. So, Mr. Sadowski, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes.
Item.
Yes, thank you, Alder Taft and committee members. Yeah, as described in the title of the item, this is to seek a grant, EDA grant, to assist in the construction of connectivity facilities between Lake Avenue and the Lake Michigan Promenade, just south of the proposed Hovde development. And what this would do is provide connectivity not only for the Hovde development to the promenade, but then also further south down to the festival site and the proposed hotel and civic center renovation. So that's the basic emphasis here, is to apply for the grant, hopefully obtain $1 million to assist in the construction of some type of connectivity facility between Lake Avenue, the promenade, and the two nodes there of the hotel and the hotel convention center.
Okay. I see Alder Tate has a hand up. Alder Tate, please proceed.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the soft match that's referenced and what exactly that would be, or at least what roughly that might be.
Yeah, there's been a lot of commitment by the city, especially on the Hovde property, in concept, but in potentially as part of a development agreement, to provide assistance to that project for public improvements to the site, to the surrounding infrastructure. So that's what we would use as our match, our
Okay,
soft match.
So the existing expenditures that are already associated, we would identify as the match to the grant.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
great. And, you know, if for some reason we weren't able to secure these funds, you know, how we go about, or what's the existing plan to kind of fulfill those connectivity improvements?
Well, I think the first source would be the tax increment district.
Okay.
There's set aside there for assistance in providing infrastructure and that type of, I guess, connectivity facilities, public improvements to create a more lively, more walkable, more interconnected area.
Okay. So effectively, this grant would kind of save us from expending from the TIB, which was already planned, but now that these funds are available, this is almost, you know, can allow us to divert those in other ways if we're able to secure these grants.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other comments or questions at this time on this item? All right, then I believe a motion would be in order at this time.
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
All right. We have a motion to approve. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is a communication sponsored by Alder Young, and a request by Matthew Zadowski, Interim Executive Director of Community Development Authority, seeking authorization to contract with the engineering firm of AECOM for technical support to develop an Economic Development Administration CARES application for the construction assistance grant for the connectivity improvements for the CDA-owned property at 233 Lake Avenue. Staff recommendation is that a contract between the CDA and AECOM for technical support and preparing the application for the EDA CARES Act grant be approved. Further, that the interim executive director and or chairman of the Community Development Authority or their designee be authorized to act on behalf of the CDA to execute a contract with AECOM, sign documents, and take necessary action to undertake, direct, and complete contracted activities. Fiscal note is the amount of the contract with AECOM will be in an amount not to exceed $24,900. There are sufficient funds in tax extra incremental district number 14 for this request. Mr. Sadowski, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you.
Item?
Yeah, and as the title states, we're looking to be able to contract with AECOM to assist us in the preparation of the grant request. It's an important grant. We want the expertise that AECOM can bring to the table to help us craft a well-worded grant with proper documentation and proper support. We have some concept plans that have been put together already. They'll help us wade through those to pick out which one probably would score the best. And so we're looking to be able to bring their expertise on board. Once again, AECOM is a common contractor with the city, and so they do bring knowledge of the city's structure and our lakefront efforts as well. So that's why we'd like to work with them.
Okay. Do you have any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, I will, a motion is in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
Great. Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sadowski.
Thank you.
Great. Next item is item 400-20, communication sponsored by the chair requesting authorization for the mayor and city clerk to accept a $3,183,723 grant from the Federal Transit Administration low or no emission. Oh, did I skip? Oh, I did skip. I'm sorry. My apologies. Backing up. No, please, thank you for pointing that out. My apologies for skipping an item. Item number 394-20, the subject is communication sponsored by Alder Land on behalf of the City of Racine Forestry Department requesting permission as a subrecipient partner with the 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin to apply for and accept, if awarded, the 2020 Great Lakes Restoration Initiative Forestry Insect and Disease Mitigation Grant control number 00308. Staff recommendation is that permission to apply for and accept, if awarded, the 2020 Great Lakes Restoration Initiative Forestry Insect and Disease Mitigation be granted. Fiscal note that this grant will award $60,000 to our community to purchase 600 trees and supplies and materials. A 25% match is required and will be met through funds spent on EVAB management, tree planting, and in-kind labor and equipment. Are there any questions or comments or? Who wants to speak on?
Oh, no, we have one.
We have anybody? Okay. Okay, I don't think we have anybody to speak on this particular item, so a motion would be in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now the next item is communication sponsored by the chair requesting an authorization for the mayor and city clerk to accept a $3,183,723 grant from the Federal Transit Administration Low or No Emission Vehicle Program. The staff recommendation is to approve authorizing the mayor and city clerk to accept the grant from the Federal Transit Administration Low or No Emission Vehicle Program and agree to use funds awarded under the Wisconsin Transit Capital Assistance Grant Program in the VW Mitigation Program in 2019 as the local match. Fiscal note, these funds will be used in conjunction with the Wisconsin Transit Capital Assistance Grant Program, the VW Mitigation Program, funds that were awarded to the city in 2019 to purchase 9 electric buses from Proterra and associated charging equipment. The Wisconsin Transit Capital Assistance Grant will be used as the match for these funds. The Common Council approved the application for these funds under Resolution 124-20. Mr. Mayor, would you like to speak to this item or I can? Or
yeah, I mean, I'll turn it over to Kathleen in just a second. But this is some really helpful funding for the city of Racine right now, both in terms of how it helps us not only mitigate air pollution but mitigate our budget crisis. And you know, I think it also helps facilitate what I think once we get these electric buses online might be the most energy efficient bus fleet in the state. So a lot of great work went into this. I want to thank the staff, Kathleen and her staff who worked on this. Jim worked on this before he left, as has Mike Meyerly, done a lot of great work on this. So I just want to acknowledge the staff who've really helped us best leverage these funds to both innovate what we're doing, but to also maintain these really important transit services for our residents.
Thank you.
Just to add on to what the mayor said, he's absolutely right. This is a really, really great example of leveraging both federal and state dollars to get as much as we possibly can for a new initiative within the city of Racine that's been important to the administration. So it'll allow us to buy a total of 9 electric buses. So these additional dollars get us basically 3 additional buses so that we can make a substantial impact on our fleet of buses. So again, as the mayor said, Michael Meyerly did a lot of work associated with this, as well as Administrator Pelnick. So this is a really great opportunity for the city of Racine.
Great.
And also, Kara Pratt's been involved in this as well. I just wanted to give her a shout out for her work on the electric buses in particular.
Fantastic. Are there any questions or comments about this item? Okay, seeing none, a motion would be in order.
Move approve.
Second.
Great. All right, so all in favor of approving item 400-20, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is 401-20, communication sponsored by the chair requesting authorization for the mayor and the city clerk to accept a $990,171 grant from the Federal Transit Administration Bus and Bus Facilities Capital Grant Program, grant control number 00330. The staff recommendation is to approve authorizing the mayor and city clerk to accept this grant from the Federal Transit Administration Bus and Bus Facilities Capital Grant Program and agree to use these funds awarded to procure 2 replacement diesel buses and replace the existing dispatch system. Fiscal note, the grant requires a local match of 20%. The match has been incorporated into the 2020 city capital budget. Funds will be spent out of account 602-82011-57310-82004, with the city match being transferred from 450105960. Fisher, please take a
Chairwoman Taft, thank you. I had told Michael Meyerly that I would speak on his behalf so that he didn't have to necessarily sit through the entire meeting, but Michael Meyerly was definitely the crafter of this, and I will give him great props for this is the most that we've got out of the federal government for diesel buses in quite a long time, as well as our very, very much needed replacement of our dispatch system, which is very dated. So this was really a big win for capital dollars out of the Federal Transit Administration. And how this particular grant works is it's an 80-20 match generally for these capital dollars. But again, that 20% match was anticipated in the 2020 budget. We always hope that we're going to get this money, and in this particular case, we did. So the match dollars are budgeted.
All right, Alder Tate, do you have a comment or question?
I do. This might be relatively broad, but one, certainly kudos to Mr. Meyerly for securing these funds. I guess my question is, noticing a lot of grants, it's a good thing. I recall a pretty not necessarily contentious budget conversation about staffing, but I'm curious as to which, if any, particular staff are really assisting with the securing and the development of these grant applications that's allowing us to bring in these particular funds, if anyone could speak to that.
Well, I think it really is overall a broad team approach. So when you write for these types of grants, you really have to coordinate between finance department as well as whatever department is involved in the main part of it. So in this case, it would be Michael Meyerly doing a lot of the narration part of the grant, and then he would reach out to finance department, in this case particularly me, and we would go through the numbers of it, make sure that we did have the capital budget allocated for it. That's very important to the FTA, as well as our transit manager over at the bus, Willie McDonald, has a lot of input on what buses are to be replaced. Federal Transportation Administration is very fussy about us defining which buses are being replaced with which grants. And sadly enough, like this dispatch system, we have probably asked the Federal Transportation Administration for that probably for 5 years in a row, maybe even more than that. So it really, really is a team effort. And when we talk about the electric buses, again, as the mayor said, the mayor's office, Kara Pratt, city administrator, those new initiatives take a lot more bandwidth in terms of who gets involved in these.
Right. And I only want to say that to acknowledge, kind of the return on investment, if you would, of, bringing in staff with a particular expertise and intentionality with their roles to say, we're going to have people writing grants and people specifically reaching out and fighting for particular grants. And when we go into this year's budget conversation, talk about who we hired and what they produced in terms of revenue to addressing needs that are otherwise tax levy was not able to produce, I think it's going to be abundantly clear that, our staff have a value that, well, one, is very monetarily clear, but two, goes beyond kind of those sometimes can be petty conversations about particular jobs, because it produces what we otherwise would not have if we didn't have certain staff in place. And I think that's just very important to kind of emphasize and highlight, and certainly give kudos to folks like Vicki Selko, Kara Pratt, and everyone else who was working so hard to bring in revenues that we otherwise did not have in prior years to address needs that would have gone unaddressed without them. So kudos to those folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tate. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? A motion would be in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. Moved and properly seconded. Do we please vote as you I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tired. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Fantastic. Motion carries. next item is a communication sponsored by the chair requesting authorization for the mayor and city clerk to accept a $1,259,098 grant from the State of Wisconsin Department of Administration under the Routes to Recovery Program for COVID-19, grant control number 00323. Staff recommendation is to approve authorizing the mayor and city clerk to accept the $1,259,098 grant from the State of Wisconsin Department of Administration for the Routes to Recovery Program for COVID-19. Fiscal note, there is no local match. Eligible expenditures are being segregated in the city's ERP system under project number 1007-COVID-19 and will be submitted to the state for reimbursement when authorized.
Thank you, Chairman. So again, I'm going to talk on this one, sorry. So the city of Racine, as well as all the other governments in the state of Wisconsin, were allocated money under the Department of Administration's Route to Recovery program dealing with COVID-19. We were allocated $1.259 million. The rules associated with these grants are relatively strict. I did include some paperwork with your packet for that reason, but the majority of what it can be spent for, a lot of PPE, but some of the interesting stuff in this one in particular deals with the ability for our employees and as well as the council members to telework. So what is nice about this one is being able to expand our use of telework and being able to get the equipment that everybody needs to be able to do that. So that's a little unique to this one. I have done the first claim associated with this one actually because it was due July 15th. We have spent already, because it's retroactive to March 1st, we've spent about $350,000 of this so far. I just claimed about $160,000 of that. So we'll make some additional claims going forward as we solidify. But
okay, thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions or comments associated on this item? All right, seeing none, a motion would be in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 399-20, communication sponsored by the chair from the Assistant Finance Director requesting authorization to carry forward various budget items from 2019 to 2020. Staff recommendation is that the resolution authorizing 2019 to 2020 budget carryovers be approved. Fiscal note, these are budget carryovers for commitments that were existing, encumbered, and funded in prior years, as well as projects that have spending periods over 1 year in length. There is existing funding in place for this action.
Madam Chairman, thank you for listening to me yet again. This is a standard operating practice that we do every year. This is a little bit late because of COVID. But basically what this is saying is there are certain commitments that we have already made to contractors, whether that be through a purchase order or a full contract. That is the column in your packet defined as net encumbrances. It means we already have a written commitment with those vendors, but we haven't fully spent the money or fully paid them in full. What happens is that gets carried forward to the 2020 budget and then is paid in the 2020 budget. The other piece of this is what's called a carryover. And what that is when we borrow capital money, we have the opportunity to spend that money over 2 years. So the majority of these carryovers that we talk about are those unspent dollars from capital money that we borrowed in 2019. The majority of these dollars are already committed in 2020. So for example, there are paving programs that are taking place right now that weren't necessarily encumbered or committed until January, February, or March of 2020 that these dollars are paying for. The second piece in your packet details out all of the things, all of the accounts that cover those carryovers. Any questions? I'm happy to take any questions. The numbers are relatively large, but consistent with prior years.
Okay, Chair recognizes Alder Tate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in what way does the carryover affect, our budget dynamics going into the next year? You say most of it's already, like the vast majority is already allocated and it's kind of a way, but, for the little part that may not be allocated, in what way does that influence or impact our budget standings going into the next fiscal year?
That is definitely a good question. So in the majority of cases, particularly with the carryovers, again, these are borrowed funds, meaning that we already borrowed the money and have the cash on hand. Right. So in terms of the budgetary implications for subsequent years, there really is no budgetary implication because we already have that cash on hand. It just wasn't fully, the contract wasn't fully executed last year.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, a motion would be in order.
Move to approve.
Okay. Moved and properly seconded. All in favor of item 399-20, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to the end of our agenda. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Alder Taft.
Good night.